Hello everyone, you have come to Tata Comic Preview channel. Let read together. Have fun. As for his other requests, well, he did not dare to push his luck. Send our guest away. After Duansheng left the evil sky pavilion, Zhou waved his arm and said, if there's nothing else, that'll be all for today. I'll take my leave, master. Safe journey, old senior. Zhou stood up and returned to the eastern pavilion. Shining Palace, Imperial City of the Divine Capital. Imperial Grandmother, Zhou Yu belongs to the evil sky pavilion. You must be wary of her words. The prince who stood in the bedchamber was the heir apparent, Lu Ji. The Empress Dowager closed her eyes and did not look at Lu Ji. With a stern tone, she said, do you wish to see me die as well? Lu Ji's face fell. He kneeled at once and said, I dare not. I'm only worried that something bad might happen to you. If something were to happen to me, it would have happened in Obedient Villa. Is there a need to wait until now? The Empress Dowager slowly asked. Ever since the incident in Obedient Villa, she had a newfound dislike for all the princes. Lu Ji continued to kneel as he said, Imperial Grandmother, I will surely give you a satisfactory explanation regarding second brother. Please don't let this bother you. At this moment, Li Yunzhao, who had been standing at the side for a long time without saying anything, finally spoke up, Your Highness, I have something in my mind, but I wonder if it's appropriate to say it. Speak. Li Yunzhao was a famous person by the Empress Dowager's side, after all. Lu Ji had to take him seriously. The Empress Dowager's sickness can't be allowed to fester. Moreover, His Majesty has given his agreement. If you wish to fulfill your filial duty, Your Highness, you should be considerate of the Empress Dowager. Also, Li Yunzhao glanced around him before saying in a hushed tone, the Empress Dowager is still pained by the death of His Second Highness. Please don't bring this topic up. You have a point, Eunuch Li. Lu Ji stood up. He bowed and said, Imperial Grandmother, I have a close guard with a profound cultivation base. Since you're going, I'll leave him with you. That'll be all. The Empress Dowager's eyes were still closed as she waved her hand. Goodbye, Grandmother. Lu Ji retreated out of Shining Palace. He barely took a step outside the palace when his guard came up to him. With his hands on his back, Lu Ji walked and said, Tell Jiang Liang to escort my grandmother to the evil sky pavilion. I will take care of his family. If he brings back Jiang Aijian's head, he'll be handsomely rewarded. Understood. Over the past week, Lu Zhou had been meditating on the heavenly writing scrolls in the eastern pavilion until his extraordinary power was completely replenished. After his extraordinary power was replenished, the only benefit from continuing to meditate upon was that he could increase the number of times he meditated upon them. However, Lu Zhou chose to stop. He opened his eyes. He called up the system dashboard and looked at his remaining life. 6,574 days. Breaking through to the 9-leaf stage would damage one's life. If I have enough reversal cards, can I overcome that? Lu Zhou wondered out loud. He had 22 reversal cards left. Lu Zhou casually used one. Like before, the life energy around the eastern pavilion gathered around him. Shortly after, it was done. As he expected, his remaining life was now 6,874 days. The 9-leaf stage was related to his longevity. In that case, the reversal card would be much more important. Lu Zhou looked at the price of the reversal cards again. Fortunately, it remained the same. After that, he looked at the two missions related to Yu Shangrong. The first one was Life of the Melilot, and the second was the new open heavenly writing scroll. Both missions were labeled as incomplete. What he could be sure of was that the Melilot was very much related to Yu Shangrong. Longevity sword. Lu Zhou thought about the sword. Meanwhile, inside the cave of reflection, Yu Shangrong sat with his legs crossed. The peculiar thing was the longevity sword glowed with a red radiance as if it sensed something. Faint red energy would appear from it and enter his body. BZZT. BZZ. BZZT. The longevity sword vibrated slightly. Night had fallen. The moon was bright. The longevity sword quietened down and remained motionless after that. Suddenly, Yuan'er gave a muffled grunt. A trail of blood appeared at the edge of his lips. He opened his eyes and sighed. He did not seem surprised by this. Like Wuya, he attempted to break the mantra after his cultivation base was restricted. Alas, it ended in failure. Wuya could not even find someone to break it for him even though he was resourceful, let alone someone else. However, this was the common fault of men. They would never turn back before hitting the southern wall. Yuan'er looked at the longevity sword by his side. He shook his head and said, "I won't die yet." He closed his eyes again, focusing on his injury. Ding! Punished Yuan'er. Reward, 300 merit points. Trying to break the mantra, are we? Yuan'er was startled by the voice. Master? Zhou walked through the barrier with his hands on his back. He saw Yuan'er sitting cross-legged with blood trailing down the side of his lips. When Zhou heard the notification from the system, he knew that Yuan'er had tried to break the binding mantra. It's futile, Zhou said tonelessly. It's better than sitting here and doing nothing, Yuan'er replied. Zhou sat down slowly on the stone bench. He pointed at the opposite stone bench and said, "Sit." Yuan'er was slightly taken aback. He was never treated this way throughout his time in the Evil Sky Pavilion before this. He looked at his master, who seemed calm and spoke in a largely different manner from before. He had trouble believing this. Finally, he rose to his feet before he sat on the stone bench opposite his master. The moonlight shone on the stone table. Zhou stroked his beard and said, "Since you address me as master, you'll answer my question honestly." Yuan'er frowned slightly. He did not know what his master would ask. He was instinctively fearful. Apart from the memories, I'll answer everything else. Zhou had expected this. In truth, even if Yuan'er did not tell him about the memories, he could make his own inferences. Therefore, there was no need to force him. Have you tried to enter the 9-leaf stage? Zhou asked. I have, Yuan'er replied honestly, as a cultivator, a peak 8-leaf cultivator, I'm standing before the doors of the 9-leaf stage. Nobody would be able to fight the curiosity to open the doors and sneak a peek. Alas, there's nothing but an endless night behind that door. I saw no future nor hope. Zhou nodded. You're from Nobleman Nation. Your life is as fickle as the Melilot. When Yuan'er heard this, his heart skipped a beat. However, he quickly regained his composure. This was not some secret that he should be ashamed of. The Melilot was a plant unique to the Nobleman Nation to begin with. It had been mentioned several times lately. There was bound to be someone in the Evil Sky Pavilion who knew about it. At most, the 8-leaf stage can give you 500 years of life, Zhou added. Suddenly, Yuan'er picked up his longevity sword. He was about to stand up, but he realized that his master was still seated on the stone bench with no intention of snatching the longevity sword from him. Zhou stroked his beard. He had an expression that said that he had expected this much. Who can stop me if I want to take your weapon? He raised a palm. A gust of energy wind entered the cave. Yuan'er tightened his grip around the longevity sword. His cultivation base was sealed. How could he resist his master? Although Zhou's cultivation base was only in the Tao transforming divine court realm, it was enough to deal with Yuan'er whose cultivation base was sealed. Whoosh! The longevity sword flew into Zhou's hand. Yuan'er lunged as he tried to take the sword back. Zhou waved his hand. An energy wall kept Yuan'er at bay. Zing! Zhou drew the longevity sword. The blade had a faint reddish glow. Shortly after, Zhou felt the life energy on the longevity sword. The immortal ties my hair and wishes me a long life. Zhou appraised the longevity sword. It was said that the longevity sword would absorb some life energy every time it took a life. Lu Zhou was now certain that it was true. It was no wonder that Yu Shangrong valued the longevity sword this much. He was depending on this sword to live. This sword was his life. Master. Yu Shangrong fell to his knees. Lu Zhou shook his head and said, "Is this your secret to a long life?" When he gave Yu Shangrong the longevity sword, he did not know that it was capable of this. Throughout the years, Yu Shangrong was, perhaps, the only person who knew how much time and effort he had put into this sword. The melilot blooms in the morning and wilts at night. I had no choice. Yu Shangrong said. Do you really think that you can live a long life with the sword? The longevity sword can't do that. All it can do is grant me the same lifespan as any other cultivator. Yu Shangrong replied honestly. To think that living for a millennium was also wishful thinking for an 8-leaf cultivator. Zing. The longevity sword was returned to its scabbard. Lu Zhou waved his arm. The energy wall vanished. Lu Zhou tossed the sword back to Yu Shangrong. He said with a sigh, the longevity sword can't overcome the millennium limit as well. Yu Shangrong caught the longevity sword and regarded his master with surprise. He did not expect his master to return the sword to him. He remained silent. Lu Zhou turned to look at Yu Shangrong and said, "Do you despise me?" "I dare not." Yu Shangrong responded. Yu Shangrong. Lu Zhou suddenly called out his name. Yu Shangrong's heart skipped a beat. He tightened his grip around the longevity sword again. Lu Zhou stroked his beard and said indifferently, "I can tell you now, that I'm going to kick the doors to the 9-leaf stage open." Yu Shangrong was stunned. Lu Zhou waved his sleeve and left the cave of reflection. At this moment, the longevity sword and vibrated before its power rippled into the surroundings. Yu Shangrong's brows were tightly knitted together.